Why is secularization so hard in the Islamic world? Why do some countries vote for religion? Today, let's explore a book that asks a bold and uncomfortable question. The book is called Islamic Exceptionalism, written by Shadi Hamid. Its question is simple: why is secularization so difficult in the Islamic world? First, what does secularization actually mean? It means religion slowly leaves public life as a country grows richer and more educated. Faith becomes a private matter, not a set of laws for everyone. This is what happened to Christianity in Europe over several centuries. Many people assume every civilization will follow the same path. But the Islamic world seems to break this rule again and again. Let's look at some surprising examples. Turkey was once called the model student of secularization. For nearly a century, its leaders pushed Western reforms with a heavy hand. But when real democracy arrived, voters chose religious conservatives like Erdogan. The country began moving back toward religion, not away from it. Egypt tells a similar story. In 2011, the Arab Spring gave Egyptians their first truly free election. The West cheered, expecting a victory for liberal democracy. Instead, voters chose the Muslim Brotherhood, whose slogan was, "Islam is the solution." In Palestine in 2006, a fair election brought Hamas to power, not the moderates. And back in 1979, Iran shocked the world. The Shah had banned headscarves and forced westernization on his people. The result was the Islamic Revolution, which turned Iran into a theocracy overnight. Do you notice a pattern here? In that region, religious conservatism seems to work like gravity. It constantly pulls society back toward its stable state. Secularization, by contrast, looks like an unstable exception. Keeping it alive requires strong men, armies, and enormous energy. The moment that pressure disappears, society snaps back like a compressed spring. So why does this keep happening? Hamid's answer is sharp: Islam is fundamentally exceptional. Careful, exceptional here does not mean better or worse. It means Islam's factory settings are different from Christianity's. From day one, the two religions handled faith and power in opposite ways. And before you ask, no, this is not a Western attack on Islam. Shadi Hamid is an Egyptian-American scholar, and he is a Muslim himself. His book is a reflection from inside the faith, not an insult from outside. To understand these factory settings, we must travel back to the beginning. Let's start with Christianity and its founder, Jesus. Historically speaking, Jesus was a political dissident under the Roman Empire. He had no army, no territory, and no government. As the leader of a persecuted minority, he spent years avoiding Roman authorities. So Christianity learned to survive in the cracks of Roman law. Jesus never tried to replace the emperor. Instead, he drew a famous line: "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's." Hamid argues this was more than wisdom, it was a smart political compromise. The hidden message was, I don't want your throne, I only care about souls. For centuries, early Christians never had to run a state. They never wrote criminal laws or collected taxes. They developed a theology for living under someone else's rule. In other words, separation of church and state was Christianity's original condition. So when the modern West separated church and state, it wasn't inventing anything new. It was simply returning to its roots. For Christians, secularization felt like going home. Now, the story of Islam is completely different. Its founder, Muhammad, began as a persecuted preacher in Mecca. But after moving to Medina, he became something else, a state builder. He was the messenger of God, but also the ruler, judge, and military commander. In Islam's origin story, there was no Caesar standing opposite the Prophet. The Prophet himself was Caesar. This means faith and political power completely overlapped from the start. Muhammad's teachings were not only moral advice, they were actual laws. How to divide inheritance, punish theft, wage war, and make peace. These rules were written directly into the Quran and the Hadith. So when a devout Muslim reads scripture, he sees a complete blueprint for governing society. In that blueprint, there is no room for a separate, secular ruler. Turning Islam into a private spiritual matter can feel like betrayal, not reform. The two holy books are also deeply different. For Christians, the Bible is sacred, but it was recorded by human authors. Paul wrote letters, Luke told stories, each carried the marks of its era. That leaves enormous room for flexible interpretation. The Quran, however, is believed to be the direct, word-for-word speech of God. Not a single word can be changed. When God sets a law, how can humans debate or modify it? This is why Islamic law has shown such astonishing resilience against modernization. Next comes one of Hamid's most fascinating ideas, the curse of success. Early Islam was simply too successful. Within a century of the Prophet's death, Muslim armies ruled from Spain to India. Islamic civilization became one of the peaks of the ancient world. For believers, this glory was proof of God's favor. The equation, faith equals victory, was carved deep into the collective memory. Early Christianity, by contrast, was basically a tragedy. It grew through persecution, and its founder died on a cross. But that early Islamic success left modern Muslims with a painful psychological gap. Today, the Muslim world faces Western power, past colonization, and economic stagnation. From a glorious empire to a fragmented reality, the contrast is crushing. If God promised victory, why are we losing so badly now? This feeling, we should be first, but we are last, fuels modern Islamic movements. The mainstream answer is not to embrace modernity. It is the opposite, we lost because we were not devout enough. The solution, then, is to return to the past. Return to the perfect model where religion and politics were one. That is why Islam is the solution has such powerful appeal. It is not just a slogan, it summons a lost glory. When outsiders promote secularization, they think they are promoting progress. But to many Muslims, it sounds like admitting their civilization was wrong from the roots. Okay, some of you might be thinking, why not just reform the religion? Westerners love this dream, an Islamic Martin Luther leading an Islamic Reformation. Hamid pours a bucket of cold water on this idea. In the Islamic world, he argues, Reformation is not a cure but a poison. Why? Look at what Martin Luther actually did. His slogan was, Sola Scriptura, by Scripture alone. He bypassed the corrupt church and returned directly to the biblical texts. But remember Christianity's factory settings, stay out of politics, care for souls. So Luther's return to the source made faith more personal and private. It weakened church power and paved the way for individualism. Now imagine an Islamic Luther shouting, back to the scriptures. What would he find at the source? A victorious warrior prophet, a state builder, and detailed legal codes. Returning there does not lead to a tolerant modern world. It leads to a purer, tougher, more militant 7th century Arabia. This actually happened. Early modernists like Muhammad Abduh wanted to bypass conservative scholars and reinterpret scripture. Their intentions were good, but they opened Pandora's box. Traditional religious scholars had served as a moderating buffer for centuries. They used careful interpretation to limit harsh laws and restrict calls for war. Strip away that buffer, and ordinary believers face the fiercest verses directly. The result is not moderation, it is fundamentalism. This explains a puzzle: why are Islamic reformers often more radical than traditionalists? In a strange way, groups like ISIS are the Protestants of Islam. They despise traditional authority and tell everyone to read scripture for themselves. Hamid's conclusion is chilling: Islam already had its reformation. And the result is what we see today. So is there a third way, moderate political Islam? Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood tried exactly that. They rejected violence and accepted the rules of democracy. They ran hospitals, did charity work, and formed a political party. Their plan: win elections legally, then gradually inject Islamic values into the state. In 2012, their candidate Morsi actually won the presidency. It looked like a turning point in history. Instead, it became a nightmare. Within 1 year, Egyptian society tore itself apart. Millions of secular citizens marched, demanding the military remove an elected government. In August 2013, the army massacred hundreds of Brotherhood supporters at Rabaa Square. Hamid was in Cairo, and what shocked him most was not the violence. It was the reaction of Egypt's liberal elites. These educated people, who loved human rights, cheered as the massacre happened. Why would gentle liberals become so bloodthirsty? Because for them, the Brotherhood's victory was an existential threat. In the West, losing an election means slightly higher taxes. In Egypt, it could mean losing your entire way of life. An Islamist government would reshape education, law, and daily habits. So the election became a zero-sum identity war. Egypt's liberals chose dictatorship over theocracy, a deal with the devil. And young Islamists learned a devastating lesson. They played by the rules, won the vote, and were slaughtered anyway. The world's democracies stayed silent. Many concluded, the moderate path is a lie, and democracy is a trap. Into this despair stepped a monster, ISIS. We often dismiss ISIS as irrational madmen. But Hamid warns us not to underestimate their twisted logic. ISIS rejected modern borders as fake lines drawn by colonizers. It pointed at the Brotherhood's fate as proof that compromise means death. Then it promised to rebuild the caliphate by sword and fire. To desperate believers, it offered a return to that lost, invincible glory. In Hamid's view, ISIS is Islamic exceptionalism in an extreme, mutated form. So where is the way out? Here, Hamid refuses to offer cheap comfort. He exposes a huge Western assumption, that democracy and freedom always come together. In the Middle East, he says, that is often a lie. If you want liberal freedoms there, you often need a dictator to protect them. If you want democracy, the majority may vote for religious law. It is undemocratic freedom, or illiberal democracy, pick one. Hamid's painful choice: democracy must come first, even if it limits freedom. Accept elected governments, he argues, even ones that ban alcohol or enforce headscarves. As long as power changes hands peacefully, that is progress. He admits this is a tragic conclusion. As an American Muslim raised on liberal values, it tears him apart personally. But honesty forced him to accept what the evidence shows. Perhaps not all civilizations will bloom into the same color. The Islamic world may never become another Europe or America. It is walking its own thorny path between faith and modernity. We can watch with respect, and yes, with vigilance too. So, what do you think? Can democracy and religion truly coexist? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time, with another book worth thinking about.
接下来，我们来复习这部影片的重点单字与片语，每个单字会重复念几次，请跟着一起念。
Secularization. Secularization. Secularization.
Secularization 意思是世俗化，名词，指宗教逐渐退出公共领域，成为个人私事的过程。动词是 secularize， 形容词是 secular， 世俗的。
Why is secularization so difficult in the Islamic world?
为什么世俗化在伊斯兰世界如此困难？
Secularization. Secularization. Snap back. Snap back. Snap back.
Snap back 意思是迅速弹回，恢复原状。片语动词，形容像弹簧一样快速回到原本的状态，常与 like a spring 搭配使用。
The moment that pressure disappears, society snaps back like a compressed spring.
压力一消失，社会就像被压紧的弹簧一样瞬间弹回原状。
Snap back. Snap back. Resilience. Resilience. Resilience.
Resilience 意思是韧性、恢复力。名词，指承受冲击后不被改变或能迅速恢复的能力，可用于人、制度或文化。形容词是 resilient。
Islamic law has shown astonishing resilience against modernization.
伊斯兰律法面对现代化展现出惊人的韧性。
Resilience. Resilience. Pave the way for. Pave the way for. Pave the way for.
Pave the way for 意思是为铺路、创造条件。片语表示某件事为之后的发展创造了条件，后面接名词。
The Reformation weakened church power and paved the way for individualism.
宗教改革削弱了教会的权力，为个人主义铺平了道路。
Pave the way for. Pave the way for. Open Pandora's box. Open Pandora's box. Open Pandora's box.
Open Pandora's box 意思是打开潘多拉的盒子，引发一连串意想不到的问题。源自希腊神话的惯用语，指某个行动释放出无法收拾的后果，常用于改革或决策失控的情境。
Their intentions were good, but they opened Pandora's box.
他们的初衷是好的，却打开了潘多拉的盒子。
Open Pandora's box. Open Pandora's box. Existential threat. Existential threat. Existential threat.
Existential threat 意思是攸关存亡的威胁。名词片语，指威胁到某人或某群体根本生存的危机，语气比 danger 或 risk 强烈得多。
For the secularists, the Brotherhood's victory was an existential threat.
对世俗派来说，兄弟会的胜利是攸关存亡的威胁。
Existential threat. Existential threat. Zero sum. Zero sum. Zero sum.
Zero sum 意思是零和的。形容词，指一方获利必然等于另一方损失，没有双赢可能的局面，常搭配 game 或 war 使用。
The election became a zero-sum identity war.
那场选举变成了一场零和的身份认同战争。
Zero sum. Zero sum.